Next and the final report in our session, scientific session, our seminar. It's a report of Pavel Kholoshin about pottery making technology in India. Please, Pavel.
My report will be also in English. I would like to present you some of the preliminary results of the traditional pottery survey that was held as a part of the Russian-Indian anthropological project. Under this project, the team carried out an ethnographical survey on the traditional pottery in urbanized settings at the outskirts of Pune, Maharashtra, in rural areas in northern Maharashtra, and in the tribal area of the Korku community. Today we will discuss the initial results of the survey related to the potters community at Mundhwa. Throughout the work, we had an organizational support from Professor Shaunak Kulkarni of Pune University, who sadly passed away recently, and from Professor Gurudas Shete of Deccan College. Also, I would like to highlight the contribution of Dr. Yuri Tsetlin from Institute of Archaeology of Russian Academy of Science to methodological and explanatory foundations of this work. We are sincerely grateful to all of them for their help and support. Before I begin, let me say some words about the importance of such kind of research in archaeological and paleoethnological perspective. I mean, how does studying of traditional pottery help us in understanding the history of modern and ancient peoples? It is well known that pottery vessels and their fragments make up a significant part of archaeological finds at the ancient settlement and burial sites. Together with other material evidence such as pottery tools, remains of workshops and firing installations, they serve as a source for reconstructing technology of ancient pottery production. The reliability of these reconstructions is largely ensured by systematic and properly designed experimental work. But how we apply our reconstructions of pottery technology to the aim of investigating the history of people to whom this pottery belonged? The answer lies precisely in the study of pottery as a living system, in the ethnography of pottery. By now, considerable ethnographic material has been collected to reveal the structure of pottery as a system. In Russia, such a synthesis was formed within the historical and cultural approach to the pottery studies, which was formulated by Alexander Bobrinsky in the 1970s. He based on a large amount of information about pottery in Eastern Europe, which he obtained from studying hundreds of pottery production localities. Here you can see a scheme illustrating the structure of pottery as a part of human culture, according to this approach. It consists of three subsystems: material, social and spiritual culture. It can be seen that from the material remnants of pottery, we can directly reconstruct mainly the sphere of production. Ethnographic reality shows us how this sphere is connected to the rest and what patterns lie behind its transformation through time. This gives us the basis for historical and cultural interpretation of the facts of the sphere of pottery material culture. The main concepts of our approach are skill, tradition, and mixing of traditions. The skill is a stable system of sequential operation to perform a narrow technological task, for example, to prepare a pottery paste or to make a vessel watertight. The system of these skills needed to make pottery is learned by a potter in a young age, mostly from his or her closest relative of elder generation. In the stable cultural and social situation, these skills are transmitted through generations without any significant mutations, forming a cultural tradition. But under some circumstances, for example, migration of a potter to a new place, or regular contacts with potters of another tradition, or changes in cultural composition of the customers of the pottery, different elements of pottery culture can mutate in their specific ways. In most cases, it reflects somehow on technological skills. When the bearers of different traditions have regular contacts to each other, a mixing of their traditions begins, probably giving a birth to a new mixed tradition. So, systematic ethnographic research into the mechanisms of transmitting, preservation and mutation of pottery traditions under specific circumstances is the key to understanding the history of peoples through their ceramics. It provides us with this obligatory link between the technological and stylistic data on the one side and reconstruction of social reality on the other. In terms of this, India provides a large field for exploration, because it still maintains this craft in its traditional form and has a great cultural diversity. The foundation of understanding the macro processes within the pottery culture of India was laid by outstanding anthropologists Baidyanath Saraswati and Napkishore Behura more than a half of a century ago. Since then, a number of excellent works have appeared describing particular pottery localities or specific social, cultural or technological aspects of this craft. However, there are still many blind spots, both in terms of the diversity of Indian pottery traditions and in terms of general regularities of pottery culture that should be covered. So, after outlining the methodological framework, let's go back to our survey. We started from exploring one pottery quarter at Mundhwa, Maharashtra. It is a locality on the outskirts of Pune with 15 pottery workshops and 6 tandoor workshops. Our aim was to examine in depth individual workshops one by one according to a unified program. The program was developed by Alexander Bobrinsky and follows the structure of pottery as a system, covering all of its aspects, with a specific attention to technological skills. By now, we have carried out our field observations there twice, in March of 2019 and in February of 2020. Our little team consisted of just 2 members, Shikha Sharma, my co-author, a research student of Deccan College, and me. We held semi-structured interviews with the potters, documenting them on a voice recorder, filmed various stages of their work, took photos of tools, workspace, finished products. This has provided comprehensive and comparable data on the traditions of individual families and the factors that influence them. In total, we have fully explored 3 workshops, each with its own social and cultural context. One workshop belonged to a family of local potters, another to the potters who had come to Pune from Uttar Pradesh, and the third to a family where 3 local women made tandoors, that is, cylindrical stoves for baking flat bread. As for the common factors that affect pottery production here, economical pressure and urbanized environment should be mentioned. All of the potters in Mundhwa have to buy their consumables for production. Clay is bought from the villagers living within a radius of 70 kilometers. Wood from the local carpenters. The most expensive and scarce resource here is manure of cow and horse. All the potters take large orders from the middlemen who distribute the product within Maharashtra. Potters work all year round, slightly reducing production in the rainy season. They have to maintain an extreme level of productivity possible for manual work. Some of the craftsmen start to sell pottery by themselves and even completely turns into sellers. because it can provide better income. The first workshop we will discuss best reflects the most common pottery tradition in this particular area. 3 men, elderly father and 2 of his sons, are working here together. Sons make a wide variety of shapes by throwing an electric wheel, and father perform beating of one specific kind of round-bottomed vessels, ma'at, water storages. The women in this family help mostly with preparatory work and firing. The potters buy 2 kinds of clay from the villagers, dug at one place near the river from different layers. One is finer, other is coarser. Each of these clays is sieved and then mixed together in a closed proportion. Wood dust is added to the clay in a ratio of 1 part of dust and 7 parts of clay. Optionally, up to 1 part of ash can be added to 10 parts of pottery paste. For making ma'ats, these round-bottomed vessels, some sieved horse dung is added to the paste, which obviously burn out during firing. These vessels must be porous to keep the water cool. After adding water, the potter kneads the paste on the rug, first with his feet, then with hands. The paste should rest till the next day before it can be used. Despite all of the potters has shifted to electric wheel in the last 20 years, in this workshop 2 old cemented wheels are still in use from time to time. It is socketed spoket type of wheel, the most typical for Maharashtra, Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, which has undergone a number of changes since it was described by Professor Saraswati. Its spokes, socket and axle are now metal instead of wood, and the fairly is made of cement and not of clay. But the principal construction as well as the mode of work remains the same. A potter in a squatting pose spins the wheel with a wooden stick and walks while it keeps rotating due to inertia. Most types of vessels are completely finished on a wheel, including shaving the surface and minor decoration with a rotating gear if needed. However, when making ma'ats, vessel after throwing and short drying should be beaten with a paddle and anvil by the experienced potter to turn flat-bottomed blank to round-bottomed finished form. The details of this technique we witnessed that we witnessed correspond well with the observations of Saraswati and Behura in Maharashtra, despite the operation is now performed in a single go without intermediate drying. Firing is carried out here in a square oven made of bricks with 6 inlets in total, 3 on each of 2 opposite walls. Inside the oven, several elongated props are constructed from bricks and vessels in order to distribute the air coming from the inlets. The pots are placed upon these props along with pieces of wood. The pile is evenly covered with pot shots to keep the heat inside during firing. The firing lasts for 1 night and demands about 150 kilograms of wood fuel. This type of firing organization is common for Maharashtrian potters and, according to Saraswati, is related to southern tradition. Skipping to the other details, let's move on to the second workshop mentioned above. That of a potter migrated from the small town of Azamgarh in Uttar Pradesh. He moved here with his wife due to economic pressure more than 20 years ago, following the example of his uncle's family. Today, 3 closely related families from that town live and work here, sharing a common pottery tradition, significantly different from that of Maharashtra. The differences from the local potters started from the higher requirements for clay quality. Local clay is too coarse for them compared to the fine alluvial clays of the Ganga Valley. It cannot be treated the way they are used to, without adding any temper to the paste and with the vessels drying under the direct sunlight right after the throwing. Moreover, they like the color and smoothness of the vessels made of their familiar clay. So they order that clay from their hometown, located in more than 1,000 kilometers from Pune. It is rather expensive. So they mix it with the finest of local clays in close proportions to get the paste with acceptable properties. This is a perfect illustration of the adaptive nature of skills of selecting raw materials and paste preparation. In this workshop, only electric wheel is in use, so we could not trace the differences from the local tradition in this aspect. The only thing that slightly differs is the pose of a potter during throwing. The one from Uttar Pradesh sits on a low seating, which is not typical for the local potters who walk squatting without any seating. Assortment of production has changed more tangibly. Rarely they make a kind of teacups, kulhars, because it is not popular in Maharashtra in contrast to Uttar Pradesh. Instead, here potters often get large orders for small ceremonial pots, bulky, which are uncommon in the north. In this new cultural context, potters rarely cover the vessels with red and gold, which is typical to the Uttar Pradesh traditions. Besides the fact that they cannot find here iron-rich clay for making in gold, and have to buy it from their hometown, the common dishes in Maharashtra are usually made in a natural terracotta color. It is also a good illustration of the phenomena that we call external and internal aspects of pottery production culture. The first correlates with cultural traditions of the users of pottery and covers mostly the appearance and usability of the vessels, while the second, internal aspects, refer to technological details and are important only for makers of the pottery. These two aspects have its own regularities in different cultural situations. Moving to the last stage of technological process, we can observe here a completely different tradition of open firing. It does not need any permanent constructions, such as oven, and just need an open spot in the yard. First, the circular cushion of wood pieces is made. Several cow dung cakes are put in the center, and a china chimney is placed vertically upon them. You can see it on the second picture. Then the pots are stacked upside down around the chimney, forming a pile. The pile is covered with lists of glass wool, making a dome on the fifth picture. Ignition starts from the chimney, and then fire, due to good draft, spreads to all the fuel beneath the vessels. Apparently, this is quite modernized version of the traditional fireplace with an apical fire channel, vertical fire channel, common for northern India, as Professor Saraswati stated. The modernization concerns to the use of a chimney. Traditionally, the fire channel is formed due to the large space between the stacks of vessels in the center without any chimney. And the second modern trait is covering with glass wool instead of traditional coating with straw and mud. Type of fuel is also unusual for open firings. Traditionally, it involves mostly light fuel, such as cow dung, straw, and brushwood. All of these changes in firing organization seems to be connected with overall economic pressure and urbanization rather than cultural reasons, despite in this case potters have borrowed all of these innovations from other potters of the same tradition. Finally, let me move to the third workshop, where 3 women are involved in tandoor making. They are 2 sisters who learned the craft from their mother, and their sister-in-law, who also learned how to make tandoors from her mother-in-law after the marriage. They use local clay without respect for its fineness and mix it with a good amount of horse dung, 3 parts of dung to 4 parts of clay. A little amount of ash can be added as per its availability. For building the tandoor, sisters use the coiling technique. Each coil covers half the circumference of the tandoor. 2 coils form a finished ring. After rising the walls up to every 30 centimeters, the tandoor is left for hardening, and then the walls are beaten with paddle and anvil. You can see it on the left picture. After a week of drying, it is this procedure is repeated several times till the tandoor is finished, which takes 2 or 3 days. After a week of drying, it is ready for firing. For this purpose, sisters use the rectangular oven, similar to the one already described. But in this case, one of the walls is collapsible to allow loading of such large items. The sisters fire from 6 to 9 tandoors at once, depending on their size. In this workshop, we found an interesting device related to the hand-built pottery tradition, which is still practiced amongst women in rural area. It is a turntable made of 2 stones, presumably quartzite. The upper disc had a working surface of a specific concave shape, and a wooden spike fixed in a cavity in the center. Sorry, where is sorry? Here, wooden spike, fixed in a cavity in the center on the underside. It rested in a depression in the lower disc and served as an axle. The turntable had a diameter of around 30 centimeters. It was very old and had been used by the sister's mother for many years for making vessels as well as tandoors. It is not working properly now. The axle is almost worn out, but still one of the sisters uses it for making bases of her tandoors. Here we can see the remnants of women-centered hand-building pottery tradition that we observe in the skills of preparing the paste with large amount of organic temper, coiling technique, using the turntable. These facts demonstrate the very archaic roots of this tradition that could have been conserved through the thousands of years due to religious prohibition for women to use a proper pottery wheel. Here this tradition is mixed with another one of tandoor building, which can be traced in many parts of South and Middle Asia. A number of technological features make the Indian tandoor tradition very different from that of other regions. For example, the usage of dung as a temper instead of hair of cattle or straw, and the proper firing, which have never occurred, for instance, in Middle Eastern tandoor making. Therefore, I would like to conclude saying that this was the first venture which made us acquainted with the extremely rich world of Indian pottery. It showed, even on such a limited material, that the complexities of social cultural processes that are taking place nowadays in India. It is quite a challenge to distinguish all the factors affecting the potters and highlight those regularities that are common for traditional and not modern society. Despite this fact, to me, we could get much more curious and promising information from these 3 workshops that had expected before. Further exploration of pottery making in Maharashtra must bring important and relevant results. Thank you for your attention.